Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new series by Youth Climate Save on different panels and different events about youth organizing, environmental organizing, climate organizing, and different topics of interest. Today, we'll be talking about youth activists for sustainable diets, particularly focusing on the dietary patterns that we need in order to mitigate climate change, biodiversity collapse, different kinds of issues along those lines. And in a more hopeful note, hearing from amazing young people who have already been active on these issues, have been doing work in their communities, advocating for key stakeholders in government and locally. And so we're going to be hearing from them, their efforts, and what they want. So this will be a very exciting first panel for us. And I would like to now welcome uh, the young people that we'll be hearing from today. Welcome, everyone. So let's get started by going through a quick introduction round question, which is to say your name, where you're based, and one word or phrase that comes to mind for you when you think of sustainable diets. So, Nikki, could you go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I am Nikita, and I'm currently located in San Jose, California. And I guess the word that I would think of when it comes to food systems is compassion.
Thank you so much. Anaya, can we pass to you?
Hello, my name is Anaya. I'm based in Houston, Texas. And a phrase that comes to mind when I think of sustainable diets is whole foods, whole life.
It's beautiful. Genesis?
Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Genesis, and a word I think of when I think of food systems would be plant-based foods that are good for the environment.
Thank you, Genesis. Bailey?
My name is Bailey. I'm from Australia, and the one word that comes to mind is consistency, being consistent in our morals and what we want for climate action.
So many creative words today. Sophia?
Hi, my name is Sophia. I run Youth Climate Save Houston, and a phrase I think of when describing a sustainable diet is more plants, less meat.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sophia. So these are some of the first kind of glimpses into what the considerations are and what we're thinking of when we think more sustainable, eating better for the planet. So I think this is an exciting way to get started. And speaking of sustainable diets, why are we even talking about diets in the first place? Why would you say that it's important to touch on the foods that we eat and our dietary patterns? Nikki, I'll pass to you once again.
So I think it's really important to talk about diets and the food that we eat because it impacts the immediate and long-term health of our bodies as well as our physical environment and the other sentient beings that we share this planet with. And a lot of times we don't really stop to consider the role of something so simple as the food we choose to eat. But meat and dairy is not only bad for us in the long term, but also for the short term of our physical health and general well being. And if we want to even begin to address the emergency of our climate crisis, then dealing with their food systems is something that we have to do. And if we have like even a slight bit of compassion towards the animals that are horribly abused under unsustainable systems such as factory farming, then sustainable diet is the first thing that we need to address.
Thank you, Nikki. Anaya?
Hello, I believe that it's important to talk a lot about our diets, especially because times are always changing, and the diets, especially here in America, are very similar to the ones that we have been going over for the past 10 years or so. And so I believe it's very important because not only does your diet play a role physically, but it also plays a role in your environment as well, just like Nikita says. It plays a role in how you feel, your motivation. So I believe that it's very important because it just affects everything as a whole.
I definitely resonate with that. That's definitely one of the reasons that I started looking at diets more, is because I realized it impacted so many of the issues I cared about. And also that being outside of the US, I see that a lot of developing countries are following the example of what we call developing countries are following the example of the US and going in that direction. So it's important to turn that around before we all go down that path. Genesis?
Yeah, I think it's really important to talk about it because I think that there's a lot of people that might have not heard about it, or like they don't know. Like I didn't know at first, so then after I did research, it was like animal agriculture had to do with the environment, and it has to do with your health, and it has to do with the animals. So there were so many things that I learned from it. So I think it's really important to speak about it, because then more people will know, and if there is more people that know, then they will want to do something about it and they will want to act on it.
Yes, that's completely right. It's so often a matter of just not having these conversations for most people, right? Of course, there are some people who are completely against addressing diets, but we find that the vast majority of people lie in between passionate advocates and people who are against dietary change, and they just haven't been talked to about these issues, hasn't been brought to their attention. So I think there's an enormous amount of people, including young people, that we can reach. Bailey?
I think it's just important because we can have a positive or negative impact every single day. And then when you look at animal agriculture being the leading cause of climate change and ocean dead zones, and, you know, just watching recently Seaspiracy and just seeing, you know, how, like, much of an impact, you know, a plant-based lifestyle can have is just really important, because we can just do it every day. And, you know, every positive plant-based walk, it just makes such a big difference. And I think as well that plant-based, you know, a lot of people don't realise just how good it is as well.
Yeah, definitely. Seaspiracy is definitely a topic of conversation recently, and I encourage everyone to check it out if you haven't already. It's a great way to open up some more of this information and conversations around the fishing industry and seafood, so-called blue food in international spaces, which honestly is not talked about enough. Thank you, Bailey. On to Sophia.
Yeah, so going off of what you and Bailey were talking about, Seaspiracy, which I watched yesterday, the food we eat has a significant impact on a variety of things, whether it be the well-being of animals, the environment. Going off of Seaspiracy, with all of the commercial fishing going on in our ocean, it's leaving us with fishless oceans, and it's also taking in other aquatic animals as a result of bycatch, such as sea turtles and dolphins and sharks and whales, which are so important for the biodiversity of the ocean. And so something as simple as just leaving, you know, fish off of our plate can have such a big impact on how we help the environment. So that's definitely where I can say how the food we eat is important in a variety of reasons.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Yeah, we definitely have seen some really popular movements, such as skipping out on plastic straws, right? And not often taking that kind of idea to the point of thinking about, okay, what's really impacting ocean life the most? Is it really the 0.03% of plastic straws in ocean garbage, or is it the fishing nets that make up the majority? So I think it's really important to open up these conversations. And speaking of these kinds of issues, I'd love to hear some more about the work that each of you have been doing, whether that's in your school, online, through panels such as this one. I'd love to just hear some more about your work. And I think I'm going to flip the order a little bit this time and go back to Sophia.
So a project that me and my friend have been doing around our community that has been associated with helping the environment is going around to different like nature parks or Galveston Beach by us or just the parks and picking up trash and disposing of it properly, because it's important to know that, you know, nature reserves overall, our earth isn't a garbage can. And if you can, use as less plastic as you can and try to opt for more sustainable products. But yeah, that's just the latest project that we've been up to.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing. Bailey, anything you've been up to?
Oh, I love advocating to people about the benefits that a plant-based lifestyle can have for the environment, for the animals, for our health. And yeah, recently, like after watching Seaspiracy, it was only a couple of days ago, I printed out a sign that was talking about how, people won't use plastic straws to save fish, but, they'll still continue to eat fish. And I actually held that sign out the front of a fish and chip shop to raise awareness about the Seaspiracy documentary. So yeah, I really like to kind of be very direct and kind of be at places where exploitation and environmental damage is happening and advocate in that way. And hopefully a few people will watch that documentary and see the information and then make a positive decision. So yeah, I like advocating that way.
It definitely seems like a lot of people are starting to watch that documentary from what I'm seeing. So I also think that direct advocacy and you mentioned like meeting people where they are and just having them notice is exactly what the youth climate movement started out as, right? Just holding a sign, sitting near the street and having people notice, especially in front of areas such as strikes in front of parliaments, the UN, different bodies that really need to hear a message. So it's exactly what it goes back to, just spreading the word. Genesis?
Lately I have been doing a lot of like panels and any like speaking events online. But also my main focus right now has been just on Youth Climate Safe, like building up chapters and getting more youth to get involved.
And you've done such an amazing job bringing all of us together. Anaya?
So most recently, I have been helping out. I'm in a mentorship where I help out a naturopathic doctor create digital content that informs her audience on certain herbs and plants that we can include in our daily diets or even every now and then to get rid of certain ailments and diseases. And I've also, as well, walked around Houston and Galveston and picked up plastic, just like Sophia, with a couple school groups.
That's really amazing. Thank you for sharing. And back to Nikita.
Most of the work I do is usually speaking events or just talking to people and holding these kind of conversations. But something interesting that I've been doing recently is I'm creating a handheld device that generates clean energy using heat energy. And this would basically help low-income communities and what we call less developed countries. And it would make electricity very affordable.
That is incredibly amazing. I would also share, just in case anyone wants to keep an eye out for it, something that I'm personally devoting most of my time to these days is the Food Systems Summit, which is going to be convened by the United Nations Secretary General this year. So definitely check out that process and get involved if you can. Now is when it gets even more interesting. Obviously, we are all doing what we can and taking action as young people for our planet, for animals, for all these different issues that we see happening. But ultimately, we will need action also by the more powerful decision makers in our society today, including governments, large corporations, those who are really in positions of power that young people simply cannot be in time to make the kind of large-scale action happen that we need to. What are your asks and demands, the actions that you would like to see from governments and businesses? If right now you could talk to world leaders and some of the largest corporations in the world, what would you say? Just a light question. Nikita, you can go first.
I guess the first thing that I would want is to address the messaging that businesses promote, because a lot of times they tend to care about profit more than the harms of their messaging on people's lives and livelihoods. And for example, I grew up with a messaging that you need dairy and you need milk to have stronger bones. But in reality, we don't, because plant-based milks tend to offer the same or even more nutrition. And I would also emphasize that governments and businesses should factor sustainability and environmental consciousness in everything that they do. For example, companies could increase the plant-based options that they offer, and the government could definitely do a lot more to address or legislation around sustainable farming and sustainable diets. The FDA could take out meat and dairy as a food group, and the government could hold studies that with funding that come from not just the meat and dairy industries, but more holistically, I guess. And if we do these kind of things, I really think that we can begin to see these necessary changes in our society.
Those are a lot of very powerful points, Nikita. I definitely agree. I know that in the US, as in a lot of other countries, the dairy industry and the meat industry have very powerful lobbying power, and that's reflected in the foods that are served to schools, right, and school food procurement. Also in the dietary recommendations that are made, which is not only an issue in terms of environmental sustainability, which is, of course, a huge issue that sustainability is not being considered at all in dietary recommendations, but also that it's not very just, especially when communities of colors, POC, have higher rates of lactose intolerance, and they're saying that you have to consume dairy, which is obviously not the case for a lot of communities around the world, which actually are harmed by that. So I think there's a lot to be looked at here, from dietary recommendations to companies having plant-based options, to government considering sustainability, and there's a lot that can be done there. So thank you so much for those points. Anaya?
So mine definitely ties into what Nikita says, more so about the messaging. My point I was going to bring up was that there are a lot of companies that would sell products titled plant-based, but they would still have dairy products in it. And I've been a victim of that when I first became a vegan. And I would also really like it if the FDA were to address their regulations in terms of what they allow in certain products, because there are a lot of harmful products that they allow in foods we eat, but they allow it because that little amount is okay, or it won't harm us. But I really think that in the long run it could. So that would be very great if they could really just address being more careful as to what chemicals or products they allow in our food and the types of labelings that they use.
Thank you, Anaya. Yeah, we've been talking about Seaspiracy a little bit, and I hate to keep jumping back on that, but that does talk about a lot about labels and if they really are that helpful, or if sometimes misleading, making us think that something is healthy, plant-based, good for oceans, good for dolphins, when it's actually not. And I think that's often the case not only with greenwashing, but also a term that the Better Food Foundation has been talking about as humane washing, right? People see something that says, oh, it's pasture raised, grass fed, and it leads them to think that that food is humane or that it's better for the environment even. And that is often just a label that doesn't mean that much, doesn't make that much of a difference, honestly. Thank you so much for those points. Bailey?
Lacking when it comes to like stopping misleading claims, because there's so many misleading claims, and I feel like we could get so far for climate action and animal rights if these if there were laws that were to stop such misleading claims, because it just really is, it's just really disgusting that they're able to show so-called happy animals, or say that their product is good for the environment when it isn't. And I think that can help in terms of showing the public that this is not true, and actually giving the public the full story, because at the moment they've only got one very misleading side of the story from animal agriculture and other cruel industries. So yeah, I'd love for at least for fines to be quite high, because when you think about it, these companies will have these misleading claims and they can make so much money, And then when they do get in trouble, the fine is just so little, so it doesn't really stop them from making such misleading claims. So I'd love that to happen, as well as no subsidies for animal agriculture, definitely.
Subsidies is a really important conversation to be had, because that's often something that impacts consumer behavior that consumers cannot directly have that much control over, right? If the meat and dairy ends up being cheaper, if the fast food and factory farmed food ends up being cheaper than the fruits and vegetables, and you're not a very privileged high income person, ultimately it's going to be so much easier for you to consume foods that are worse for your health, worse for the environment, worse for climate change. So I think that is one that we definitely had to bring into this conversation. So thank you so much for mentioning that. And I also want to bring up a quote by Paul McCartney on, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be vegetarian. And that just speaks to, so often consumers just don't have a view of what's happening in the food industry, and these labels are not very reflective of that. They often make consumers think one way or another that's environmentally friendly, humane, good for oceans, good for animals, so on. And if consumers just had a clear view, right, if they were just honest, they could make much better choices with their diets. Genesis, on to you.
I think if I would want like laws to be passed, I think I would want plant-based foods in all schools, because I think that's a way for youth to have more access to plant-based foods, because I think there are a bunch of youth that want to try plant-based foods and are really open-minded to it, but they think like, oh, I don't know how to eat plant-based, I don't know what to eat. So I think if we have this in school systems, then it will be so much easier for youth to be more open-minded to trying plant-based foods. And I think every school should have at least one plant-based option, so that there's options for all students, that they don't feel that there's nothing for them if they do go plant-based. But I also do totally agree with the labels, like y'all were saying, because I think when you go to the grocery store, you see so many labels that make people feel good about themselves. So they're like, oh, like when I eat these eggs, like they're cage-free, so it's okay, like go me, like I'm eating these cage-free eggs, and like you're telling me about how I'm harming the environment, but like they have like this thought like, oh, like the chickens are free, or when it's like grass-fed beef, then they think like, oh, like it's better for the environment, which it's not. So I would want to make sure they're telling the truth with their packaging. But I think that if there was also one thing that I could tell to world leaders, I would probably tell them that these labels shouldn't be lying about what they're selling. And then another is that if we could get plant-based foods in in all school systems.
Thank you, Genesis. So I've mentioned before that I'm involved in the UN Food Systems Summit, and these are actually two areas that have that are being looked at. One is front of package labeling, which is putting some more labels on like as government mandated to say like this is how it lines up climate wise, this is how it lines up environmentally, which I think is really interesting. It's not exactly getting rid of the private profit labels that are misleading, but it's putting on another label to counteract that perhaps. And another one is a lot of member states are excited about school food, and specifically locally sourced school food, getting fruits and vegetables from local communities that they also support their parents, and they're able to keep students in school longer around the world. And I think it's also really interesting to look at something that we've been talking about is aligning procurement, so the school food that is sourced more with dietary recommendations, and then considering sustainability more in dietary recommendations. So that is one way that we're hoping to move in that direction. Obviously, we need a lot more efforts, a lot more schools just being enthusiastic about this in local communities. But from the international level, there is some interest. So hopefully that gives a little bit of hope. Sophia?
So tying what everyone said, I definitely think that it's so important for large corporations to overall have more values of compassion and sustainability over just making profit. And I say that because with compassion and sustainability, we have a chance of having a healthy planet for our future generations. as Greta Thunberg said, we need to be in a panic mode, and we need to think of our house on fire, because we only have so much time to act before climate change can become irreversible, or not climate change, global warming can become irreversible. And yeah, overall, through compassion, we can have a world where love is spread for all life on Earth. And yeah, so we can have a healthy planet.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to wrap that demands up to government, world leaders, corporations, everyone who needs to hear us. Next, I'm going to go to some questions that we've got in quickly from the audience, just a few of them. One is that we got a question, which I think I'm going to direct to Genesis, from Anita on what we were doing for Earth Day, specifically Vegan Earth Day.
Well, for Youth Climate Save, we're going to do some live streams, and we're going to do some videos for Earth Day. But me personally, I go to school in person, which it's a social justice school. So we're going to have an Earth Day celebration, and I will do some actions for the Earth, and I will try to speak to some of the students, and I'm going to talk to my classroom about Youth Climate Save to get more youth involved in it.
That's amazing. Is anyone else doing something special for Earth Day and would like to jump in?
Me and Anaya.
Just
you can go ahead. It's fine. Or I can go. Okay, so me and Anaya are going to get together, and we had an idea of making a big vegan cake to represent an Earth, and overall showing a recipe on that. And then on our post, we'll have multiple slides just elaborating on how youth and other people can take part in helping the environment. Whether that be, going vegetarian or vegan, or starting a compost, or other things that can significantly help our home. And so we just plan on spreading knowledge on how you can help the Earth while making that vegan cake.
That's beautiful. I love the idea. Bailey, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I'll be doing some advocacy on that day. Around the seafood industry. I think that's really important, because obviously the earth, and we've got the oceans, and so underrepresented. Yeah, I'll be doing some activism with that, which I'm really looking forward to. And yeah.
Wonderful. And we still have some time too to make some more plans for Earth Day for anyone who doesn't know yet. We still have a month. So hopefully you can get some really powerful actions going. One last audience question for anyone who wants to answer it is, what made you go vegan?
I'll jump in and answer that question. So before I went vegan, I was a heavy meat eater. My family's Caribbean, and we always eat a lot of rice and meat. And so what made me go vegan is that I was experiencing an ailment within my body, and I was extremely young. And so I did what everybody else did. I went to a doctor. I took the pills. It went away for a couple days, came back worse. So I went and I was like, I need to figure out how to do this myself. So I went, I did research, and I found maybe some know of Dr. Sebi, who really inspired me to change my diet. And I found out that once I changed my diet, within 2 weeks, my ailment was permanently gone. So that's what made me transition to vegan. And I don't plan on going back to eating meat again.
That is such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing. I think now we're going to go into our final wrap-up round. So I'd love to hear from each person in basically your final message and your takeaways from this conversation that we've had here today. Who feel free to take as much time as you want. Just say basically what your final message is before we wrap up. So maybe we can start with Sophia.
So my final message is overall, when given the choice, choose compassion. Compassion leads to amazing things for so many different aspects, whether it be saving the life of animals or our fellow humans. And despite all of our differences, we all share one thing in common, and that is our home Earth. So, you know, we are here to support you. The Youth Climate Safe family is here to support and love you, and overall just advocate for a healthier world.
Beautiful. Genesis, your final takeaway?
I think for any youth on here, if they're already activists, to keep speaking up and keep on using your voice, because sometimes you can feel kind of overwhelmed by everything, but it's really important to keep on going because youth voices are really truly making a difference, and there are people that are listening to us. For the adults on here to keep on supporting youth and inspiring youth to be activists and to use their voices, because it's really important for youth to use their voices, because it shows adults that if we can do it, then they can do it too. And it's really important for youth voices to be out there.
Thank you so much. And that applies to so many different topics, right? So many different issues in which we need more young voices to be heard, and for us to join together and make sure that the youngest generation, the next generation, is being considered, who will have to live with the impact of decisions being made today for the longest time. Bailey, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just keep strong with it. We all know that we're doing the right thing for the animals, for the planet. Never be silent. I know that it can be hard times, when people are doing certain things, or maybe people aren't quite listening, or people are slower to understand what we're talking about. But just keep on going, because there are so many people out there that do support our message, and there's going to be so many more people that will open their eyes to the truth. So just keep on doing it, and promote plants, go vegan. It's awesome.
Thank you, Bailey. Definitely consistency is key with this work, I found, especially being able to do it long term. So if you need to take a little break, do that, but don't give up, do what you need to do, and keep joining us, and we'll keep supporting you in this fight for against climate change, for biodiversity, for animals, for a better, more sustainable future. Anaya?
My final takeaway would be to not feel pressured, especially if you're just now going vegan. Don't rush yourself like I did. Don't try and change your whole diet in a week. It will not work. Give yourself time. Allow for mistakes. It happens. We're human. As long as you keep going and use your voice when you feel like it, back up being vegan when you have others going against it. Just take your time. Feel pressured. Don't feel pressured. Don't feel pressured. Sorry. Do what resonates with you, basically, is my final message.
Yes, that's a great message. I definitely did the change my diet overnight with my what do you call it? My path to more sustainable eating, and I know that can be difficult for some people, and of course it's very important. I think this is always a stumbling block for anyone trying to eat a more sustainable diet, whether they're trying vegetarian, pescatarian, vegan, wherever they're at. I think people don't realize that you will make a mistake. You will mistakenly eat something that has milk in it, or that has something that you wish that you didn't, and it happens to everyone. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't mean that all the progress is gone. Nikita?
I just want to say that this is a time where we need to choose compassion versus thinking about our own self-interest, because helping others and other sentient beings just makes us better people, and it really creates a more sustainable future and a sustainable mindset. So if we choose to apply truth and compassion to every aspect of our life and everything that we do, then our actions would be ethical. So there wouldn't be the issue of what's right and what's wrong. And we would all be capable of making beneficial decisions for both us and our communities and our environment. And I guess for every person, for all the youth that want to make a change, our words do hold a lot of power, and adults are realizing that they need to start listening to us, because we're not usually developed into the mindset that everything should be for profit. So, yeah, our words are important. So I would just say speak up, strike, do whatever you need to do to make your voice heard.
Amazing message. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. Thank you to our amazing panelists, and thank you also for everyone who has been listening in to our first panel of this ongoing monthly series in which we'll be covering different topics, different areas as well. Thank you all so much. It's been great having you here today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.